For making way here today. We start off the day, Partners for Growth in Advanced Manufacturing. I would also like to thank the National Manufacturing Week for inviting us to be here today. Many of you might have heard about Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center or the Growth Center in general, but it gives us a great opportunity today to engage with you and elaborate a little bit what we are doing. And it's also a good opportunity to share our vision with you in ways we can partner for that growth. Let me say first of all, and most importantly, government has changed its industry policy, and I would like to say to the better. If we have a look at these axes, along these axes there is sector and an activity axis and an axis of market and policy. You see also 4 quadrants in there. So let me start in the lower right axis of an activity and policy. This is the area of the enabling quadrant. This is a quadrant which explains to you all how the 10.3 billion of R&D in Australia are being spent. In the lower right quadrant, the very familiar expenditure to CSIRO, to universities, to research institutions. When you go to the upper right quadrant, this is a facilitating quadrant. It's market driven, but not for a specific sector, but for the overall activity of R&D. There, in this quadrant, you would place R&D spending. In the lower left quadrant, you see the directing sector. You have examples like car industry, steel industry, and in regards to the image of manufacturing in general, we all probably have our view in regards to car industry and where that image sits. The good news is that the direction of R&D spending and the direction of policy government is taking lifts it up to the level over the sector and activity, a more targeted, transforming and facilitating approach and less of a directing approach. Now that makes a lot of sense if you think about it that, for example, the car industry in a country of our standard of living, our cost structure, our small market of 23.5 million potential buyers and 60 car brands is probably not the best idea to put car manufacturing in place rather than supporting it in the long term. So there are probably better ideas where federal policy can empower the implementation of the vision of having a more advanced manufacturing thriving and increase the competitiveness. The growth centers, there are 6 of them, one of them being the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center, and this is what I want to speak about today in more detail. But there are 6 other growth centers. Besides the advanced manufacturing, the cybersecurity, food and agribusiness, medical technologies and pharmaceuticals, mining equipment, technology and services, and oil and gas and energy resources. This is where Australia puts its big bets. This is where Australia is focusing on. These are the knowledge priorities where government has decided where Australia is and can remain competitive on a global stage, not only domestically. So concentrating and investing in these 6 industries will significantly move the needle, including advanced manufacturing, but for all of these sectors. So the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center has to deliver a plan how to make this sector more competitive over the next decade. And I would like to acknowledge John Pillaire's visionary work with the other CEOs in the manufacturing area. Without the industry raising the awareness for manufacturing and the future of manufacturing, we probably would not have ended up with the growth center in advanced manufacturing. So good on him. And it cannot be underestimated how important it is to shift the focus of public perception in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and in the reality. And this is what we speak about today as well. In more detail, and speaking about government policy, these 6 growth centers you see in the middle, which I just mentioned, sit in the center, and they respond to the question, how can we better invest and allocate the $10.3 billion being spent in many ways today probably not the most effective way. And this is where the decision to focus on the growth centers rather than spreading our efforts too thinly, which would then lead that we try to do everything and we end up doing nothing, by focusing on that one to get better outcomes of our investment. The 4 desired outcomes of investment are to remove unnecessary and overburdensome regulations. That was priority number 4. 3, increase engagement between research and industry and within industry, and to achieve commercialization outcomes. On the second priority stands improve managerial and workplace skills, and on number 1, improve engagement with international markets and access to global supply chains. These 4 priorities, these desired outcomes, have been tested by the advanced manufacturing growth centers within the industry. 80 plus companies gave us their view, what they think about the priorities, and the priorities are listed like that. Let me give you some examples. The number 4, remove unnecessary and overburdensome regulation. Advanced manufacturers have already reached out to global markets. They are not being hindered by regulations according to what they told us. Because they reach out from the Australian, from the domestic market, they are affected less, and their advice to the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center has been, don't worry, don't waste your time and your efforts on that topic, not so relevant for us. The second last priority was the better cooperation between research and industry. Now, many of you might have heard about the OECD study where Australia ranks on rank 32 or 33 out of 33 countries in regards to cooperation between research and industry. So that's probably poor, and the examples companies gave us that we have given up on that. If we have a challenge to tackle in the technology sector, we hire PhD students directly, finance their PhD, and have one employee more on the payroll. So there is a disillusionated view on that matter, and there's probably something we should and could do about it, because successful companies, successful countries integrate research and industry cooperation in a better way. From our advanced manufacturing ecosystem, our companies we talk to, there is not such a positive view. Higher priorities is given to the increase of managerial and workplace skills, but the utmost importance for potential members in the growth center and the utmost importance in regards to the priorities of advanced manufacturers is the improved engagement with international markets and international supply chains. Why do Australian manufacturers who are successful tell us that? And how do we learn from that? If we look at this picture, you see the 2 large aircraft manufacturers. We all know them, Airbus and Boeing, and there's another country like China, being from the A like Airbus and B like Boeing, the C, China Aircraft Corporation, a large nation who aspired to work in that place. Now, let's be honest, will Australia be well advised to endeavor to be the D in the chain? I believe that is not the case. Let's go one level deeper. The next subsystems of an aircraft integrator, let's say braking system, lavatory systems, and windows, but also this market space of the tier 1 subsystem suppliers, and there is Recaro with seats, and there are engine manufacturers. These are already large and globally successful corporations on the tier 1 level, where I think Australia is also not too well advised to place its bets. However, beneath these levels, there are companies already operating today in global supply chains in the space of so-called intermediate goods who are very successful on the global scale. And this is a space where Australia has already great successes. These are the untold stories, these are the hidden champions who are part in airliners, who are part in Apple, iPhones, and in other very known products of our day-to-day use where we basically not too much aware about. 41% of the global trade happens in intermediate goods, 41%. So we're not talking about commodities, we are not talking about finished products, 41% global trade in intermediate goods. Now, Australia, what do you think, how much does Australia participate in its trade in the space of intermediate goods? It's a shocking figure, it's 1%. I couldn't believe it, so we tried to verify these numbers with the statistic officer of Australia, and it's a sad story. 1% compared to 41% of global trade. That, however, gives massive opportunities because this is an uncovered space in which Australia could, in regards to advanced manufacturing and in other areas, be globally engaged. The way we want to do that is to replicate success models what other companies have done already. I give you an example, real life example from my previous life. We were trying to build military helicopters in Australia from scratch. Makes a lot of sense for submarines or helicopters to be built in country for many reasons. One reason is that by building these machinery, which is in country for 30, 40, 50 years, when you build them, you also use the jigs and tools and build the knowledge base to then sustain, support, and upgrade these platforms throughout the life. Now, with that knowledge and that stimulus in mind, we had small companies who I thought at the beginning when I came to Australia to build these helicopters, they were forced kind of on us, you need to work with these companies. In the old days this was called offset, today we call it industrial participation. It sounds a bit nicer, it's basically the same. But we were forced and we were like kind of reluctant. Why did we do that? But I can tell you my learning curve has a very steep one and a surprising one because a small company in Victoria who then not only delivered cables, complex cable booms for the helicopter fleet for Australia, then suddenly delivered the cable booms for the entire global fleet for military helicopters. And now this company made the change from a small to medium-sized, globally successful companies, and even dares to deliver to our competitors, has cable booms now in Airbus, in Boeing planes. It's a fantastic success story. So to replicate this idea is in the core of the operating principles of the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center. Now, how do we do all that? There are 5 operating principles of the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center. First of all, we are an industry-led organization with engaged enterprises. So we're not after members who observe and wait for the next paper to be released. We would like to have members who are engaged and work within the space of advanced manufacturing. Secondly, we endeavor to engage Australian manufacturers with global supply chains and therefore markets and market opportunities. Third, how do we do this? We do this via collaboration in real projects. So we are basically replicating the success story I was so amazed about, how a small Australian company who was kind of forced to be part of a global operation, who used that opportunity and become globally successful and change the needle for them, for their employees, for their baseline. Fourth, we work exclusively in the commercialization valley of death, and my next slide will speak about this. The Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center is all about making science a commercial success. We are not there to produce nice papers and get nice peer reports for the universities. We would like to bring that into commercialization. Fifth, the government initiative for an advanced manufacturing growth center and all the other growth center is done by an upfront funding. We are funded for 3 to 4 years, but we endeavor to create in the advanced manufacturing growth center so much value for our members that our members stay members with us, and we have our administrative costs that way covered, because we endeavor to change the needle not for 3 to 4 years, but we have a 10-year horizon to make an impact on the advanced manufacturing in the country. Speaking about industry-led, now you are probably familiar with the technology readiness level, where we find a language to compare how ready is a technology in comparison to others. The levels go from 1 to 9, and usually what we can hope to get from research institutes, universities, is a technology beyond the idea, beyond the proof of concept, maybe in form of a demonstrator, and then we speak about the technology readiness level 3. Very little from these great ideas and demonstrators and concept papers and outputs at that level make it through this commercialization valley of death, go into a real application and become a product on the market, on the shelf. So the focus of the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center is entirely in this valley of death to get it from technology readiness 4 to 7 and then make it a viable product, a viable service. This is important because we do not have a push approach and hope that out of the great research being done in Australia, and where we know that Australia punches above its weight already, we're not relying that out of that we will have winners. What we would like to do is having an industry pull. So our projects target to integrate the cooperation of multinationals with a clear demand for a solution, with a clear challenge, with a clear problem, and combine that with research institutions, but not the research institutions telling industry which direction one should take, but we have a clear direction, a clear pull from industry. And in this project environment, we combine small, medium-sized, local, successful, willing companies with research and multinationals. I spoke about membership and projects. I also would like to speak about the sector competitiveness plan. But let me start with the policy direction on the right-hand side. In my first chart, I said the direction of government has changed. The direction goes towards finding what are we successful in, where can we punch over our weight globally, not domestically. An advanced manufacturer can only be an advanced manufacturer when we are not limiting our thinking and our acting on the domestic market. Who would ever want to limit itself to 23.5 million when there are 7 billion customers out there? With that policy direction in mind, it is fundamental that we work with members, so talking about you guys, we are working with advanced manufacturers and create projects, and these projects which we want to access the global supply chains are the vehicle which has been the success story for the company who has made it from a small local cable producer to a globally successful advanced manufacturer out of Victoria. With the membership and the projects, I would also like to speak about another deliverable, the growth centers. All of them have to deliver, and this is the sector competitiveness plan. The sector competitiveness plan and the approach we are taking gives advice to government in which the policy direction can be re-informed and reconfirmed by us as the advanced manufacturing industry. So it's a closed circle, which I come to in a moment, because I owe you an explanation. What is it all about, the sector competitiveness plan? Let me confuse you with that slide. In 2014, government was seeking advice what direction to take in industry policy, and one contribution was done by McKinsey. They wrote a brochure called Compete to Prosper. You can Google that, it's online. I recommend the reading. If you don't want to spend time reading 60 pages, read the executive summary. It's worth reading, because that is the intellectual birth hour of focusing on strengths rather than trying everything a little bit and extending the dying of an unsuccessful industry. The shift in policy to spend the money where we get the best bang for our buck. That has happened based on that ideas. So it was very logical for us as a growth center to continue working with McKinsey and another company to develop the backbone of our sector competitiveness plan 1.0. Now, why is it 1.0? Because the growth centers, including ours, has to deliver on a yearly basis a sector competitiveness plan, which then advises government on the direction. Now, let me give an example of a successful country who has made a massive transition in that regard. New Zealand. Some time ago, Australia was asking themselves not why we are losing rugby, that's not solved yet, but why is New Zealand more successful in dairy? If you go back to the early 90s, New Zealand's world market share in dairy products was 1.3%. Australia's world market share was 1.3%. You look 10 years later, Australia was still 1.3%. New Zealand was in the two-digit range. How are they doing that? So McKinsey looked into that, and they found out what are the compressible reasons, why are they doing something better, and how did they do that? And when I say compressibles, then I'm speaking about levers you have to influence, for example, the cost structure. What happened in the dairy industry, what was compressible, were two facts. The one fact was responsibility of the government. New Zealand had a trade agreement with China, and that made a difference of 36 cents to the kilo for their cost advantage. And the other part was that they focused their scattered dairy industry into one location called Fonterra and had cost advantages of 20 cents. So if you are able to get your act together and compress your cost by 55 cents to the kilo, this is then where you can rule the world market and run circles around Australia when it comes to that area. So with that idea in mind, we are using the same approach of the same company to investigate the advanced manufacturing. So you'll see a chart 1, 2, 3. How can we make Australia's manufacturing more competitive? And early findings show that the cost area, the cost sector, given our wage structure, is not the most compressible approach we are taking. So we need to think maybe a bit deeper, a bit more complex. Where are other areas where we can punch about our weight? Where can we make a difference? And this is where I'm speaking not about the cost and trying to be cost competitive in the car industry, which we never be, but where can we differentiate our value? What value does it bring that a product comes from a, let's say, quite heavily regulated, but therefore very safe environment like Australia? Take milk powder again. I know from own example, to get milk powder from Woolies or Coles, it can be sometimes difficult because there are other countries who do not have the trust in their product, the integrity of their product. So even our milk powder might be 10% more expensive, but the value it brings is something where we can differentiate. And this is what we investigate in the sector competitiveness plan. Another area which we're investigating is a market focus. The outreaching focus of our advanced manufacturing is a key distinguisher where we can bring value to the global market provided we are able to compete. Now, that being said, by investigating the compressibles in the cost, but also in the value differentiating and the markets focused area, gives us answers in our sector competitiveness plan for advanced manufacturing where we can make a difference. As I said, the sector competitiveness plan will enforce members in government where we should position ourselves in that value chain. The value chain of advanced manufacturing, or of manufacturing in general, very often is being perceived as production, smoking chimneys and old style of putting things together. That's only one element in the value chain, as most of you probably will know and have heard many times before. If we focus on the entire value chain, starting from R&D, logistics, production, distribution logistics, marketing, and sales and after-sales experience, if we take the entire value chain, then we can be an advanced manufacturer provided we are not focusing now come back to the sector competitiveness plan, on the compressible and the cost side, but we can focus on other things. So there is the secret where companies have made the transition successfully as an advanced manufacturer and still be a relevant player in Australia. So where is Australia today? We have amended that chart, which you probably know, with this little blue charts down below. How are the jobs in Australia distributed in one concrete sector? And this sector is aerospace. We're starting to investigate the Australian landscape of advanced manufacturing by sector by sector. One of them we started with is aerospace. You can see in that chart that Australia has 45% of the jobs in an area where we are less competitive, in the production side. Successful manufacturers, successful companies move away from the center and move to the sides, to the beginning or to the end of the value chain. So let me give you two examples. Let's take all the iPhones which I see. Let's take that iPhone. We have in the iPhone a value add process, and the production of an iPhone, which happens in China, is approximately 20% of the value add of an iPhone. An iPhone which has a microphone and a speaker from an Australian advanced manufacturer, by the way, globally successful in iPhone. So 20% of the value add of an iPhone happens in the production, happens in China. Nobody would doubt that Apple is an advanced manufacturer, but nobody would also say Apple is a Chinese company, right? So where production happens is less relevant as long as we are on the value chain in an area where we can be globally competitive. The decline of the prestige of advanced manufacturing in general happened a couple of years ago when the car companies started closing down the final assembly. Now, yesterday, and I think the folks from Ford won't mind that I mentioned the example, once Ford closed their manufacturing, their production in Australia, for some time, nobody in Canberra wanted to talk with them anymore. They were like persona non grata. And it was an uphill battle for Ford to explain how they made the transition from the value chain, from the production middle part to the beginning part. In the R&D sector, 1,700 Ford employees in Australia do R&D, not only for Australia and New Zealand, but for the entire Southeast Asia region. So the long-lasting, the value generating, the high-value jobs have been transformed in the value chain where Australia can be competitive in the long term. I think it's a success story, but again, a success story which is an untold one. It is unfortunate. So we have, as one of the aspects of the advanced manufacturing growth centers, to change that perception. I showed you that chart before. It is important to emphasize again the operating model of the advanced manufacturing growth centers. Members engage in real projects, make real changes to the needle. The projects with the members inform the sector competitiveness plan, and the sector competitiveness plan and the outcome of it, and then again informs the members. So there are two streams: a paper, which is a plan, which has been updated on a yearly basis, and then there are the projects which enable us to get part into the global supply chain. So whoever is part of that, whoever's part and sits in the center of that, is of course in the prime position to further advise government to continue and focus the effort where it makes the biggest of the difference. You saw that picture before, the global supply chain. I cannot emphasize enough of that. On the side, you see our tier member structure. A tier 1 member is a multinational, globally operating companies, usually foreignly owned, who are keen to engage with research and small and medium-sized enterprises in Australia. The Australian ingenuity is highly regarded globally. So the question is not for you, should you be part of it? It's more the question, can you afford not to be part of it? If we don't take the competition to the world, then the competition will come to us. The presentation from Siemens I found amazing this morning. With the digitalization of the global supply chain and with the Internet of Things, our favorite excuse is kind of diminishing, the tyranny of the distance. There is no distance anymore, as we know, and as advanced and successful manufacturers will know. Let me recap. We are mandated to transform the industry, and we have a complete backing and support by the government. The growth centers are where the money is investing, where the country is investing its money, and this is again confirmed in the budget and has, by the way, bipartisan support. Our sector competitiveness plan will have tangible outcomes that will make our sector more competitive. This is more than just about production. It is about the entire value chain, and it's also about a mindset change. We work in the technology readiness level area from 4 to 7 in the Valley of Death, and our focus is commercialization for export, and it is industry-led. The growth centers and its members are sitting in the pole position to steer and continue to steer and support the government direction, which I believe they have taken the right direction. Think of the opportunities and be part of the global supply chain. And to sum it up with a popular quote these days, there has never been a more exciting time to be an advanced manufacturer. Thank you very much, and I stand ready for questions.